Sup you beautiful people. Hope you've had a fantastic day. Welcome back to a brand new episode of What If Deku Had Intuitive Aptitude Quirk. Izuku always wanted to be special, to have a quirk. And one day he got his wish. Izuku found out he could take quirks. Something Izuku didn't want. Unfortunately, this quirk came with a price. He needed more to have more. So, he became a hunter. A predator. If you guys enjoyed this what if, comment down below and let me know. And go ahead and check out other what ifs in the channel. After watching this video, don't forget to shower some appreciation onto the incredible author responsible for this fanfiction. The link is conveniently waiting for you in the description box down below. Before we get into it though, don't forget to subscribe and leave a like, and also share this video with your friends. So let's start this video. Home. Izuku looked up to see his apartment complex a block away. He could use enhanced jumping to get there quicker. But he was too injured and didn't want to draw attention. With a sigh, Izuku began to walk home. He knew it was a bad idea since that would be the first place the police and heroes would check. But he needed to see his mom now that his mind was clear. To explain and apologize. For everything. As Izuku continued to make his way home, something shocking happened. DKU! Izuku froze in place. He dared not move or even breath for the longest time. With a deep sigh and sad frown, he turned around to where the voice came from. There, a couple of feet from him, stood his former best friend and now main bully standing there. His face and eyes filled with rage. Kachan! Both former friends stood there, staring at each other. Katsuki glaring at the wounded Izuku with all his anger, while our young vigilante/hero stood there with a somber expression. Izuku never thought this would happen. Not in a million years. Maybe in his nightmares, but not now. What are you doing here, Kachan? Izuku asked softly in a serious tone. This caused Katsuki to growl and clench his fists in anger. He wanted nothing more to walk over there and beat Deku until he was an inch from death. But he needed answers. What the fuck? How did a shitty nerd like you get a quirk? How did you get a shit ton of quirks? Katsuki yelled out, trying to contain his anger but failing. And why the hell are you a fucking vigilante? This is all bullshit. Whatever tricks you have to convince those dumbass won't work on me, Deku. Izuku just stood there, still holding on to his injury. The burn he got from that fight. He could feel himself getting weaker. Eventually Izuku sighed as he looked up at Katsuki. I don't have to explain anything to you, Izuku stated coolly as he turned around to walk away, shocking Katsuki. Go home, Kachan, before you get hurt. As Izuku walked away, heading towards home, Katsuki stood stunned. Then that quickly turned into a seething rage. How could such worthless nerd like Deku dare say that to him? What gave him the right? His quirkless ass needed to be taught a lesson, from making his mom worry about him and tricking those shitheads for believing he actually had a quirk. The ash-blonde hothead's hand began to smoke and burn a little. Don't you dare turn your back on me, Deku! Katsuki yelled out as he had enough, and charged at Izuku with his right arm and hand raised. Eat shit and die! As the explosive quirk user got closer and closer, Izuku sighed. He wasn't in the mood for this. Izuku turned around and raised his free arm and hand. He readied himself as Katsuki got closer. And when he was a mere foot away, Izuku let him have it. He used his sound emission quirk. Soundwave Blitz! Izuku yelled out as he shot a shockwave of sound at Kachan, who didn't have time to dodge because he was stunned. Izuku did have a quirk. So, Katsuki was hit by the shockwave of sound. It was so big and powerful that windows began to break from the buildings behind Katsuki. He was powerless as he had to shut his ears and fall down to one knee. Arg! Katsuki yelled out as Izuku kept on firing his sound emission. Izuku suddenly began to walk towards Katsuki, who remained helpless, which pissed him off to no end. As Izuku walked towards Katsuki, the shockwave of sound only got stronger. When he did arrive, Izuku stopped using sound emission and quickly activated another quirk before Katsuki could recover and attack. Izuku's free arm quickly turned into metal, and before Katsuki knew it, he was backhanded by Izuku into a building's outer wall. Katsuki yelled out in pain as he fell to hard ground. While nothing broke, it still hurt like hell. Izuku gave a regretful and sympathetic look at Katsuki, who began to get up, his pained expression filled with rage. Go home, Kachan. I don't want to hurt you, Izuku said, dropping his sympathetic look. People most definitely heard that. I don't have time to mess around with you. I need to see my mom before the police or pro-heroes come. This made Katsuki growl more. He clenched his teeth as he shook off the pain. So, you do have a quirk? More than one, huh? Katsuki roughly said with a deep scowl. Don't you dare look down upon me because of that, you shithead. I don't care how many quirks you have, or even if you are the fucking stalker. You could be the boogeyman for all I care. I'll still kill your worthless ass. Izuku was beginning to grow impatient. He didn't need to hear this. It was always the same with Ka-chan. All the yelling and cursing. He was tired of it. I'm telling you one last time, go home Bakugo. Izuku stated, dropping his former friend's childhood name, making him flinch a little. I may be hurt, but I'm not the same Deku. Go home! Katsuki's scowl remained as sparks began to ignite from his hands. He couldn't believe that Deku of all people was threatening him. This was a joke. That attack and backhand he got was a fucking joke. Deku was nothing but a fucking joke. So, this what you've been doing? Hunting low-life assholes and fighting heroes. Making your mom worry for your worthless ass. Katsuki yelled out, letting all his rage out. He then pointed a finger at Izuku. All that talk of you wanting to be a hero, that was all bullshit. And you being quirkless, that's a bullshit lie you've been telling me. You've been making look like a fucking fool. DKU. The tension in the air was thick. It almost felt heavy to breath. Katsuki just stood there glaring at Izuku, waiting for an answer or something. Izuku stood there, his head lowered, hiding his expression. He then looked up at Katsuki, smiling. Suddenly after that he started to laugh, angering and confusing Katsuki. Ha 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 ha. Izuku laughed out like a maniac. He kept that up for a good minute before calming down and sighing. He then looked to Katsuki with a dark look. You really are a fool if you think that's true. Katsuki backed up a bit, stunned to see this kind of side to Deku, but more angry that he insulted him. Look at you. Just because you have a flashy and powerful quirk, you automatically think you're God. Guess what? You're not. Izuku yelled out in a very uncharacteristic tone. There are more powerful people out there than the two of us, who could move mountains, raise storms, destroy cities, and kill hundreds in a blink of an eye. And all you can do is cause a tantrum and blow stuff up with your sweat. Your sweat. Katsuki clenched his teeth and fists as he let all of Izuku's words process in his head. It pissed him off beyond all belief to be talked down to. And by Deku of all people, you know what? Between the two of us, I think I'm stronger than you. That immediately made Katsuki's eyes widen in shock, before seething back in a rage. More rage than he's ever felt before. What the hell did Deku just say? My main quirk always me to understand how anything work, especially people and their quirks. And for the last few months, I've figured what makes you tick, Ka-chan. I know all your strengths and of course weaknesses. And don't forget, I have more than one quirk under my command. Izuku summoned a green flame that engulfed his free hand. I have a total of 13 quirks that I've required, 3 of which could easily kill you, if I wanted to. You're strong, Ka-chan, but you are not stronger than me. While you've been doing a bit of training, you haven't reached your full limit. I, on the other hand, has been fighting and hunting thugs for months. I have experience and power on my side, and to be perfectly honest, I haven't even reached my full limit. While most would think Izuku was being arrogant, he wasn't. Months of fighting and hunting had helped him get stronger both physically and mentally. Hell, he could handle 3 pro heroes at once. But to be fair, he was at a 100% when that happened. Now, he could barely stand. Overusing his pacify quirk and fighting those prisoners wasn't easy. He had the wounds to prove it. He doubted he could take on Ka-chan and win. But he wouldn't know if he didn't try. Katsuki, on the other hand, was completely livid. Oh yeah? Katsuki asked, awfully calm while still glaring at Izuku. How about we test that theory of yours? Izuku shook his head, either in disappointment or anger. He then looked up to Katsuki with a dead serious expression. I don't think you want to find that out. Even though I'm injured and a bit tired, I can still take you down. Izuku explained, still getting glared by Katsuki, who was about to lose it. Go home, or else. Enough! Katsuki screamed out as little explosions and flames shot out from his hands. You think you're hot shit just because you got a few shitty quirks? Just because you took down some no-named assholes and some pro heroes? Well, you're not. You're just a pebble in my path. A worthless fucking pebble. You hear me? Izuku sighed as he slowly began to smile in a cocky way, throwing a tantrum as always. You don't deserve that quirk. It's like giving a spoiled child a flamethrower. Go home. I ain't repeating myself again. Izuku warned as he moved his other hand from his burn injury. I don't want to hurt you any more than I have to. Instead of yelling or threatening Izuku, Katsuki just smiled in a very dark way. He then got into a fighting stance. You call that hurting me? You hit like a whiny bitch. Guess you know all about that, Akachan. Ha! Looks like you do have a pair after all. Izuku then got into his fighting stance. This was it. A fated battle between former friends. A long time ago, they were the best of friends. But now, it looks like they were bitter enemies. You know this is going to end one way, right? Yeah. With you on the fucking ground. That made Izuku smile and chuckle a little. Promises, promises. And with that, Izuku lifted up both hands and fired his sound emission. But just before he fired, Katsuki anticipated this. With a mighty yell, the explosion user jumped and fired a powerful explosion from his right hand, helping him dodge Izuku's attack. Then with an animalistic grin, he rushed at Izuku. Die! Katsuki yelled out as he got closer and closer to Izuku, who barely had enough time to stop his quirk to activate another one. Izuku quickly activated his Iron Make quirk to make a crude but huge metal shield formed from his arm. When Katsuki made it, he attacked Izuku with a strong explosion. The explosion was so powerful that it sent Izuku flying in the air. Thankfully, before he hit the ground, he deactivated Iron Make and activated his pyrokinesis to summon a huge burst of green flames from his hands, which launched him in air and sent him flying towards Katsuki, who looked very annoyed. Take this! Izuku yelled out as he stopped using pyrokinesis and activated his haze quirk, blowing out black haze from his mouth as he was flying straight at Kachan. Katsuki didn't know what that black mist was, but he knew he shouldn't breath it. With a deep breath, he raised his hands and used his quirk again. He fired 2 explosions that sent some of the haze away and sent Izuku flying again with a painful grunt. Thankfully, before he hit the ground this time around, Izuku used his stone mimicry to soften his landing, which it did. With a loud crash, Izuku landed, making Katsuki smile. But that smile went away when he saw Izuku in his stone form. Gonna take a lot more than fireworks to take me out, Kachan! Izuku yelled out with a grunt. He was of course bluffing because using his stone mimicry right now was very taxing, especially with his wounds. Thought you said you were gonna put me on the ground? Katsuki growled in response as he was getting more and more pissed off, not wanting to give Katsuki time to attack again. Izuku rushed with all his might at Katsuki, who looked ready. While not the fastest in this form, Izuku was sure tougher and stronger. He just hoped this form could handle a head-on explosion to the face. Just as Izuku was a few feet away, Katsuki raised his right hand, getting ready for a right hook. Something Izuku saw coming. Predictable. Izuku yelled out as he quickly grabbed Katsuki's right arm, and with a yell he performed a powerful judo throw, sending Katsuki over him and throwing him hard on the ground. Right hook as always! All Katsuki could do was yell out in pain as he hit the asphalt of the deserted street. Izuku wasn't done there, however. The stone-skinned vigilante grabbed Katsuki by the hair and threw him across the street, making him hit the ground hard again. Go home, Kachan! Izuku yelled out, punching his fists together. I could have punched a hole right through you when you were down. Katsuki slowly began to get up. His expression was that of anger and pain, but he was focusing more on anger now, not wanting to give up or listen to Deku. The hot head of a blonde charged at Izuku again with his arm raised, making Izuku sigh again. Izuku got on the defensive, expecting Katsuki to go straight at him, but he did something completely unexpected. He smiled and used his quirk directly under him, launching himself in air, and before Izuku knew it, Katsuki was in air over him. Die! Katsuki yelled out as he fired off 2 explosions while on the air that sent Izuku to the ground. The heat and flames he could handle. It was the force that he was having trouble with. Katsuki landed safely and afterwards rushed at Izuku again, this time using an explosion that sending him skidding across the asphalt. Katsuki was smiling as he looked at Izuku, still in his stone form, trying to get up. Where's all that shit talking now, Deku? Katsuki asked very prideful and aggressively. Look at you! Even with all your shitty quirks, you're still getting your ass kicked! While Izuku didn't want to admit it, Kachan was right. He looked all over his body to see cracks, which meant any more punishment he got would be risking something to break off. Normally this wouldn't be the case, but he's injured and have been overusing his quirks. He was fighting on borrowed time, but Kachan didn't know that. Izuku finally got up and stood there deep in thought. Our young hero was running out of options. He could end this fight here and now, but all of his counterattacks involved deadly force. While he admit Kachan was an ass, he still saw him as a friend. Or at least did. Eventually Izuku realized something. He did have another quirk that could counter Ka-chan's, though it was very risky, since he's really never had to use this quirk before. However, it looked like he had no choice. Izuku sighed as he deactivated his stone mimicry quirk. He looked at Ka-chan, who glared right back at him. The green-haired vigilante looked down at his wounds, specifically his burn mark. Looks like this is it, Izuku thought bitterly with a frown. He then smiled as he began to take off his burned and ripped up coat, then his ruined shirt, confusing Katsuki. Darn, I really like that coat too. Katsuki's eyes widened in shock by what he saw. All over Izuku's body were cuts, bruises, and a massive burn mark on his side. That wasn't all. Katsuki saw old scars and other past injuries all over his body, and that was only on the front. Izuku noticed Katsuki's look and decided to explain. Not pretty, Ka-chan. A few of these I got from you and your friends, though those I could handle. The rest are from the lowlifes and others I've fought and hunted over the months. Most are from their quirks, a few though are from other things. Knives, bats, shivs, pipes, and even a gun once. This burn mark and cuts I got all are from the police station I escaped from. While your explosions hurt, they tickle compared to what I've been through. Katsuki's shock quickly turned to anger. Even when he had him on the ropes, Deku was still acting like tough shit. I'm tired of this. I'm going to fucking kill you! Katsuki screamed out in anger. You hear me, Deku? I don't give a shit about your sob story. I'm going to end this and prove you're nothing but a worthless piece of shit. Most would be unnerved or even mad about Katsuki raving around. But Izuku smiled and laughed, only making Katsuki angrier. Come on then, Ka-chan. I might actually feel something this time. And that was it. Katsuki yelled out in anger and charged at Izuku one last time, not bothering to come up with a strategy. Katsuki only wanted one thing. Izuku on the ground. Just as Katsuki was about to unleash his most powerful explosion he mustered, Izuku smirked as he quickly got down and placed his hands on the ground. Then just as Katsuki attacked, Izuku activated his quirk. Die! Boom! The resulting explosion caused the street and any if not all nearby buildings to shake. The windows nearly that weren't already broken, broke from the shockwave of the explosion. The flames and smoke could be seen from a mile or two. Heroes and police in the area looked up in shock, then all quickly mobilized and headed to the scene as fast as they could. For one woman, in a small apartment, who's been crying and trying to contact the police. She was shocked and scared to see such a large explosion so close to her home. As she looked out, she knew those explosions from anywhere. And deep down she felt something. Or better yet, someone. Izuku, meanwhile back at the battle. Katsuki was panting. That attack was the most powerful and taxing one he's ever made. So powerful that his muscles and fingers were tensing up bad. Soon he smirked. There was no way Deku could have survived that attack. Unfortunately, as the dust and smoke began to settle, Katsuki was stunned by what he saw. Izuku was alive and was completely untouched by the attack. His hands and whole body looked red hot. Katsuki also swore he heard sizzling of some kind too, almost like a stove. The ground below him looked to be completely decimated. All the asphalt was gone. Only the dirt that laid before was all that was left. Izuku was breathing heavily and had a strained expression. He then smiled as he got up slowly. As his hands left the ground, his body began to slowly cool down. You know, that might have actually killed me, Izuku calmly stated in a fake shock tone. His body looked to be cooling off. The sizzling red was all gone. He looked at Katsuki, who still couldn't believe what he was seeing. Lucky I'm not a one-trick pony, Ka-chan. Also, it's my turn. Before Katsuki could react, Izuku's right hand turned into metal. Then with all the strength his weakened body could muster, Izuku performed a mighty uppercut, sending Katsuki flying and seemingly knocking him out. Katsuki hit the ground hard, and this time he wasn't getting up. The surprise attack mixed with Izuku giving it his all, and that punch seemed to have helped a lot. Izuku couldn't believe it. He beat his former best friend and main bully. While anyone would be celebrating, Izuku wasn't. Because how he won wasn't noble at all. He used trickery and multiple quirks that weren't really his to beat Ka-chan. That surprising punch didn't help either, especially since he used his iron make quirk with it. Izuku looked ready to fall over. But some way and somehow he was still standing. His expression was that of regret as he looked over at Ka-chan's unconscious body. He then sighed. While they weren't friends anymore, it still hurt him on the inside to fight his former best friend. Forgive me, Ka-chan, but I doubt you ever will. I didn't mean for this to happen, but you left me no choice. Izuku began to slowly walk towards his home, eventually passing Katsuki's knocked-out body. When passing, he gave him a sympathetic glance before resuming his walk. If this is the last time we meet, I'm glad we talked, at least for a little while. Goodbye. Kachan. As Izuku kept on walking, he suddenly stopped. The reason? He wasn't alone. Before Izuku could activate any of his quirks, a dozen fiber-like threads quickly wrapped themselves around him, very tightly and immobilizing him. Izuku didn't bother to struggle because he knew it would be pointless. He knew who was doing this. Never thought you'd be in this city of all places. Are you passing through, or did they bring out all the big guns for me? Izuku asked very calmly before turning his head around to see who captured him. Tsunaga Hakamata, aka Blue Genist, number 4 pro hero in Japan. Quirk, Fiber Master. Never thought I'd see you around here. What can I say? When I heard the infamous stalker had escaped as I was passing through, I couldn't help but see what all the fuss was about. Blue Genist coolly said in a well-spoken yet serious tone. His shirt sleeves seemed to be all cut up but were in fact turned into threads that were restraining Izuku. To be frank, I'm underwhelmed. I was expecting someone older. This caused Izuku to sigh with a depressed face. I get that a lot, Izuku stated with a deflated tone. That's when he noticed they weren't alone. Wow, can't believe they sent this many people after me. Izuku looked around to see many pro heroes converging on him and Blue Genist. He saw the likes of Death Arms, Native, Backdraft, Midnight, and a bandaged up and tired Eraserhead. All of them major heroes. Even if he was a 100%, Izuku knew he couldn't beat them all, let alone escape from them. You know, if this wasn't such a serious situation, I'd probably be geeking out and asking for all your autographs, Izuku somewhat jokingly said, giving a weak smile. That smile turned into a frown. Unfortunately, looks like that isn't going to happen. Before anyone knew it, Izuku activated his Iron Make Quirk and summoned a multitude of metal sharp spikes from all over his upper body, which cut and weakened the threads restraining him. With a yell, he broke out for his restraints. He then got into a fighting stance, but not before turning both of his arms into metal. All the heroes save for Blue Genist and Aizawa got on the defensive, ready for Izuku to attack, but stopped when they saw the condition he was in. He had cuts, bruises, minor burn marks, and a real major one. Some couldn't help but cringe or feel sympathetic when they saw all his past injuries. This kid looked like a battle-worn veteran. I'm not going anywhere until I see my mom, Izuku yelled out, ready to fight his way out of here. Even though that was impossible, he still wasn't ready to go down, even though his body was failing on him. I'll take you all on. Blue Genist and Aizawa knew they didn't need to fight or restrain Izuku. His body was already failing on him. It was only a matter of time before he would topple over. And the other heroes were beginning to realize that too. Come on, kid, give up and come with us, Death Arms said calmly to Izuku. You're seriously hurt. Let us help you. Fuck off, Izuku yelled out aggressively as he stopped using his Iron Make Quirk and immediately activated his Molten Hands Quirk. That got everyone on the defensive again. I'm not going anywhere. Suddenly a loud whoosh was heard from behind of Izuku. Whoosh. I think you're done, young Midoriya. Izuku quickly turned around and came face to face with the towering All Might, who was looking down at Izuku very sympathetically. Please, my boy, stop fighting and rest, All Might told Izuku in a calm yet serious tone. He then placed a hand on Izuku's shoulder, making him flinch and putting all the other heroes on edge, in case Izuku was going to attack All Might. But he didn't. I promise you'll see your mother after you get medical attention. You have my word. Izuku didn't know why, but he couldn't help but believe him. He didn't want to, but something deep down was telling him otherwise. Before Izuku knew it, his quirk deactivated and felt very tired. Last thing before his body failed on him was All Might's reassuring face. Izuku lost consciousness and fell into the arms of All Might, who couldn't help but feel sorry for the young vigilante. Rest now, young Midoriya, All Might thought as he picked up Izuku bridal style. He then looked to Aizawa. I'm taking him to Recovery Girl. Tell Tsukauchi I'll meet him there. Take care of the other child, please. Aizawa didn't make a fuss and nodded. With that, All Might leaped high in the air and began to head to UA High School, leaving the rest of the heroes in the lone street. Backdraft and Midnight went to check on Katsuki, who was still knocked out. Meanwhile, Aizawa looked where All Might took off with Izuku and couldn't help but sigh. I need a break. Fuck off, Izuku yelled out aggressively as he stopped using his Iron Make Quirk and immediately activated his Molten Hands Quirk. That got everyone on the defensive again. I'm not Going anywhere. Suddenly a loud whoosh was heard from behind of Izuku. Whoosh. I think you're done, young Midoriya. Izuku quickly turned around and came face to face with the towering All Might, who was looking down at Izuku very sympathetically. Please, my boy, stop fighting and rest, All Might told Izuku in a calm yet serious tone. He then placed a hand on Izuku's shoulder, making him flinch and putting all the other heroes on edge, in case Izuku was going to attack All Might. But he didn't. I promise you'll see your mother after you get medical attention. You have my word. Izuku didn't know why, but he couldn't help but believe him. He didn't want to, but something deep down was telling him otherwise. Before Izuku knew it, his quirk deactivated and felt very tired. Last thing before his body failed on him was All Might's reassuring face. Izuku lost consciousness and fell into the arms of All Might, who couldn't help but feel sorry for the young vigilante. Rest now, young Midoriya, All Might thought as he picked up Izuku bridal style. He then looked to Aizawa. I'm taking him to Recovery Girl. Tell Tsukauchi I'll meet him there. Take care of the other child, please. Aizawa didn't make a fuss and nodded. With that, All Might leaped high in the air and began to head to UA High School, leaving the rest of the heroes in the lone street. Backdraft and Midnight went to check on Katsuki, who was still knocked out. Meanwhile, Aizawa looked where All Might took off with Izuku and couldn't help but sigh. I need a break. The next day at UA High School. It was next day, the day after a night no one will forget. The night Japan's most infamous and mysterious vigilante revealed themselves. No could believe it. The stalker was a middle schooler, a simple boy with a simple background. And yet he was able to hunt and strike fear into common thugs and other criminal scum. He took on 3 pro heroes at the same time, saved a large group of civilians from death while putting his own in danger. It took All Might, the symbol of peace and Japan's #1 hero, to save and apprehend him. Even when he was captured, Izuku Midoriya aka the stalker managed to escape and take 3 dangerous criminals down, the same ones who were locked up with him. Unfortunately, he didn't escape without a scratch. His injuries from his encounter with Eraserhead, Kamui Woods and Mount Lady did a number on him. But the fight he had with those inmates really got him. Yet he still kept on moving. When he was close to his destination after escaping, Izuku was confronted by his childhood friend now turned bully, Katsuki Bakugo, which ended in a fight. A serious fight most pro heroes would never find themselves in. And still Izuku walked away. When All Might and the other pros found him, they couldn't believe he was still standing. Sadly, that last fight took everything out of him. In the end, Izuku fainted in All Might's arms, after of which, All Might rushed Izuku to the best doctor/nurse he knew, Recovery Girl. It took a lot, but Izuku was in stable condition and carefully cuffed to his bed, and under careful watch by All Might. The wielder of One for All stayed with Izuku all night, along with Izuku's mother, Inko Midoriya, who All Might personally brought so she could be with her son, something he wasn't supposed to do. In fact, he was supposed to turn Izuku into the local hospital where the police would take over from there. But All Might managed to pull some strings so Izuku would be under his watch, something that Inko was most grateful for. There was also the fact the hospital or any other didn't want Izuku under their care, for obvious reasons. Thank you again, Mr. All Might, for everything, Inko said in a low and grateful tone as she watched her son sleep from her chair, which was very close to Izuku's bed. She then looked to All Might, who wasn't in his hero form. I can't thank you enough. All Might, also known to be Tashinori Yagi, just smiled in response. Think nothing of it, Mrs. Midoriya, All Might stated with a kind smile. And please call me Tashinori. After all, you do know my secret. Inko nodded with a smile. Last night was crazy and stressful for Inko Midoriya. First, her son was out past his curfew, like always. Then she found out on the TV that he was the stalker. A wanted and scary vigilante, by the way, who was arrested for his crimes as the stalker and for assaulting and endangering pro heroes and many others. Inko almost fainted when that happened. She just about lost her mind when she heard explosions and fighting near her home, which she knew involved Katsuki and someone else, who she suspected was her son. After that, she tried her best to contact someone who could tell her what was going on and where her son was. Unfortunately, she was met with lies or silence. She was about to lose hope when all of a sudden, All Might came knocking on her door and explained everything. She didn't need to know any more after that. All she cared about was seeing if her son was alright. All Might was about to carry Inko to Izuku, which would have been faster. Sadly, his time limit had been spent, so he went from his hero form to his true form right then and there in front of Inko. who took it just as well as you would expect. Sorry about fainting last night when you know. Inko sheepishly apologized, blushing. I'm easily startled. All Might laughed and gave a big smile that deepened Inko's blush. Again, think nothing of it. Still though, All Might began to softly say as he looked down at Izuku. I wish I could do more. That's when Inko's blush and embarrassing expression disappeared, and was replaced by a saddened one. She knew that Izuku was in trouble. Deep trouble. The crimes he's committed as the stalker were some of the worst crimes a person could commit. Inko thanked God that Izuku hadn't killed anyone or gotten killed. It broke her heart to see her son like this. Inko slowly got up and walked over to her son. Seeing him like this, cuffed up, covered in injuries, she knew that Izuku had some scrapes and a few scars, mostly from his younger years. But all of this were from the last few months. Inko looked down at his major injury from last night, the massive burn mark. She tried her best not cry. All Might looked over at Inko and couldn't help but feel sorry for her. Mr. Tashinori, what's going to happen to my son? Inko softly asked with a bit of hesitation, afraid of what kind of answer she was going to get. She turned to All Might with a serious yet somewhat misty-eyed face. Please, be honest with me. All Might couldn't bear to see anyone giving him that kind of look. It made him feel helpless. All his power, he couldn't do a thing to help Inko from the truth. He didn't want to tell her. He also couldn't lie to her. She deserved to know, even if it would cause her much pain. The symbol of peace sighed, then took a deep breath. He looked down at the small woman with a serious gaze. I'm not going to sugarcoat it, Mrs. Midoriya. Izuku is looking to face some very serious consequences for what he's done. All Might spoke in a serious tone as he looked down at Inko, who flinched. Izuku has done some serious crimes as the stalker. As of last night, he's assaulted 19 people, 3 of whom are pro-heroes and 1 being a police officer. 13 of his victims are now brain dead, with no hope of recovery. He escaped from lockup, placed multiple people in danger. He's also an unregistered quirk user, with a very dangerous quirk that's very similar to someone that could even give the most seasoned heroes nightmares. Inko suddenly froze in place. Her face darkened as she looked down, trying to avoid All Might's gaze. You know who I'm talking about, don't you? All Might stated rather than ask, because they both know who he was talking about. What is your son's connection to the man called Scylla? Inko stood there for a while, not bothering to face the mighty hero, who kept looking down at the woman sympathetically. Eventually Inko spoke in a low tone. Please don't call him that. When I met him, his name was Hisashi Midoriya. Inko explained with a soft yet sad smile. We met a long time, when I just got out of college. Around 16 years ago. He wasn't using his real face and identity, mind you. Still, I fell in love with the man. He loved me too. Not because of my quirk or looks. He loved me for me. All Might didn't know what to say. From what Inko was talking about, it didn't sound anything like the serial killer Scylla. But he knew better. He remained quiet as he let Inko continue to speak. We dated for a while and eventually we had a baby on the way, Inko said with a soft smile as she looked over at Izuku, who was still asleep. He asked me to marry him. It didn't take long for me to say yes. He was so giddy after that. Inko smiled as she laughed a little as she remembered that day. However, that smile soon disappeared. Everything seemed to be wonderful after that. But that changed when Hisashi finally told me who he was, Inko softly said in a downcast tone. He told me who he was, what he did and why. He even showed me his true face. Inko closed her eyes as she remembered her husband. Even though he lied to her and kept his secrets, she still loved him. After all, he gave her Izuku, her baby boy. All Might remained silent as he tried to process all this. Scylla, the serial killer who took Quirks, was Izuku's father. He couldn't believe it, but truthfully, he kind of suspected it. While Izuku's quirk was eerily similar all for one, it turned out to be very similar to Scylla's. It all made sense now. Before you ask, I don't know where he is. All Might looked at Inko, who had a serious yet saddened expression. When Izuku was born, Hisashi left, but not before telling me why. Inko began to explain as he walked over to her son's side. She couldn't help but feel regret as she saw his unconscious form. He told me there was always going to be people who would hunt him, not able to forgive what he's done. I know he's killer and what he did, but that didn't stop me from loving him, and from him being my child's father. He left to protect me and our son. Inko bent down and touched Izuku's cheek. She knew what he did and why. and she couldn't hate or fear him for it. It wasn't his fault. It was just his nature. With a sigh, Inko turned around to look at All Might. I don't hate Hisashi. I couldn't bring myself to, even if I wanted, Inko said as her voice began to crack up. Her expression softened as it looked like she was going to cry. I just wish my son didn't have to suffer because of him. And because of me, Inko suddenly began crying now, making All Might feel very sympathetic towards the woman. He knew it wasn't her fault because of this. Not even Izuku's. Not being able to control and being fearful of one's quirks was normal. It was no one's fault. If anything, this was just plain bad luck. As Inko continued to cry, All Might decided he had enough. He walked over to the small crying woman, who stopped when she felt a hand gently touch her shoulder. She looked up to see All Might giving her a kind and sympathetic smile, slightly causing Inko to blush. No one is to blame, Inko, All Might said, dropping formalities. I don't know why, but something tells me your son isn't like his father. When I saw him save those people, I know he wouldn't do such terrible things unless he had no choice. While I have no idea how, I promise you, I will do everything in my power to help you and young Midoriya. Inko was speechless. She couldn't believe what was happening. The most powerful and popular hero in Japan was promising to help her and, most importantly, her son. The short mother began to weep once more. Suddenly she did something unexpected. She wrapped her arms around him, bringing him into a hug. All Might looked down at Inko in shock. But that changed when she spoke once more with a light sob. Please save my son, Tashinori, Inko pleaded, still misty-eyed. All Tashinori could do was nod. He couldn't say no even if he wanted. He didn't know how. But he was going to do everything he could to help Izuku, no matter what he did or who his father was. Suddenly an idea popped into his head. Or rather, an earlier idea his colleague and fellow hero Niza suggested. Letting Izuku, a now known vigilante/villain and an unregistered quirk user, join UA High School, a well-known and prestigious hero school, where only the best were accepted. People driving to be a hero. How would it work? Given his quirk and record, it would seem impossible. At least, that's what most would think. All Might had a plan. Meanwhile, at a local hospital, in a normal hospital room, Katsuki Bakugo was silently resting on his hospital bed, looking up at the ceiling. He had a few bruises and scratches here and there. He was also bandaged up. His face was expressionless as he kept his eyes locked on the ceiling. However, he wasn't like this a few hours ago. Apparently, after the fight, the heroes sent him to the nearest hospital, where he slept through most of the night. When he woke up, he found him in hospital garb and on a hospital bed, his mom and dad by his side. Of course, they were relieved to see he was awake and alright. But that changed when his mom hit him over the head hard. The reason? For running off in the middle of the night and confronting Izuku. Most parents would hate the person who'd placed their son in the hospital. However, Mitsuki and Masaru Bakugo weren't like that. They both knew Izuku since he was a little boy, when he and their son were best friends. While they didn't really know what was happening and why he was the stalker, they knew that he wouldn't have hurt Katsuki unless he had no choice. Mitsuki was of course mad, mostly at her son's stubborn and hot-headed personality and ego. Both parents were outside Katsuki's room in the hallway, talking and giving their son some space. I still can't believe this happened, Masaru said in a low tone. He looked over at his wife to see her looking through a window outside the hallway that showed their son and his room. Why did this happen? Mitsuki sighed as she shook her head. This happened because our son is an idiot. He was the one who ran off in the night looking for trouble. It's his fault, Masaru, Mitsuki explained as she turned to her husband, who looked surprised by his wife's response. I love our son, honey. I do with all my heart. But you have to admit, he had this coming. Masaru hated to admit it, but Mitsuki was kind of right. While he loved his son, Masaru knew that ever since his quirk manifested, Katsuki changed. And not for the better. He had grown into an arrogant and aggressive teenager, while a long time ago his mother wasn't so different. Mitsuki, on the other hand, knew better. Unfortunately, it seemed that Katsuki didn't. I suppose you're right, Mitsuki. I just wish this didn't need to happen in the first place, Masaru stated with a frown. Still can't believe Izuku did this. For heaven's sake, he seemed such a passive and calm young lad. What happened? Mitsuki sighed once again. She wanted to know why as well. I don't know, Masaru. I tried calling Inko earlier, but it just kept going straight to voicemail, Mitsuki said bitterly with a frown. She was annoyed, of course, but she was more worried, if anything. God, I hope she's alright. Masaru noticed how his wife looked. With a small smile, he walked over to her and wrapped his arm around her, surprising her. I'm sure this isn't easy for her, but you and I both know Inko is a tough woman. Mitsuki smiled softly as she nodded. She then leaned over and gave her husband a small peck on the cheek, causing Masaru to smile. Eventually, both parents were looking through the window at their son, who remained quiet and emotionless. Do you think he'll be alright, dear? Masaru asked worryingly as he kept his eyes on their son. Mitsuki remained silent. She really didn't know how to answer her husband. Their son really hasn't been himself since he woke up. He barely talked or even complained, something he liked to do constantly. Now, it seemed that fight he had with Izuku affected him harder than they expected. I don't know, Masaru, Mitsuki softly said as she placed her hand on the window. While this was happening, Katsuki remained in the same state we saw him in, just laying there while looking up at the ceiling. He felt lost. No, he felt more annoyed and confused if anything. All of this was a lot to take in, more so for him than anybody else. The hothead of a blonde still couldn't believe it. He lost to Deku out of all fucking people. Not only that, but he also found out that the little shit stain had a quirk. And not just a quirk, but a bunch of them apparently. All these years he's been lying. Lying to everyone, his mom, their school and classmates. To him, a dark scowl quickly appeared on Katsuki. He then clenched his hands into a fist. Deku, you shithead, Katsuki growled out. Losing to Deku really pissed him off. Being lied to be him only pissed him off even more. He wanted to get off this bed and track him down. Have a rematch. Because that fight was bullshit. And so was the result. At least, that's what he thought. How he felt was completely different. Katsuki felt something he never wanted to feel again. Weak, he hated this feeling. It had been so long since he's felt this that he almost forgot about it. Ever since his quirk appeared, he's felt and acted completely different. Like he could do anything. Like he could beat anyone. That's one of the reasons he wanted to beat All Might and become number one. Right now though, it felt like that was impossible. That fight he had with Deku, it made him realize something. Even though he had this badass and strong quirk, he still lost to Deku, who was seriously injured for whatever reason. He threw everything he had at that shithead and he still beat him. While that loss weighed heavy on his mind, it was what that bastard said that really pissed him off. Go home, Kachan. I don't want to hurt you. I may be hurt, but I'm not the same Deku. Go home. You know what? Between the two of us, I think I'm stronger than you. Katsuki's hands began to smoke a little. His scowl only deepened as he remembered those words. All of them came from Deku. That piece of shit. It pissed him off that worthless shithead caused him to feel this way. He wanted to kill that bastard, but he felt like he couldn't. Not after what happened. He wasn't an idiot. As much as it pissed him off to admit it, what Deku said might be true. He wasn't the same. He saw those scars and injuries. He saw what quirks he had. Well, the ones he saw anyways. There was no telling what else that bastard was hiding. If he wanted to get another shot at Deku, he would have to be ready. But how? That's when he remembered something that Shirin had said. You're strong, Kachan, but you are not stronger than me. While you've been doing a bit of training, you haven't reached your full limit. Deku was right. Sure, he's worked out and jogged here and there. Even practiced using his quirk. But never really proper training. He was of course going to do a regiment right after he graduated from that shitty school. So he could join UA, but now all that seemed to change. If he wanted to be number one and kick that nerd's ass, he needed to get serious. I have experience and power on my side. And to be perfectly honest, I haven't even reached my full limit. Katsuki let out a growl as he remembered that. The look on that bastard's face. He couldn't wait to see Deku again. With a newfound determination and a bit of anger, Katsuki brought his fist up into the air. I swear, I'll be number one, Katsuki roughly stated as he clenched and teeth. Deku, you bastard. Next time it won't be me on the ground. Count on and you fucking nerd. Wherever Izuku was, whether he was in jail or still on the run, Katsuki would see him again. And their encounter won't end like last time. An hour later with All Might. It's been an hour since All Might talked with Inko and checked in with young Midoriya, where he leaned the tragic tale of how Inko met Izuku's father, the man called Scylla. Something the all-powerful hero was still trying to process. But right now he didn't have the time to do so. Why? Because he was rushing to the UA conference room, where Izuku's fate will be decided. The chief of police would be there, along with a few government officials. Mostly a few judges and other people. The whole UA staff and a few pro heroes will be there too. Normally this wouldn't take place at a high school, but unfortunately they didn't want to take any chances. Better to have Izuku close if he would to try anything. They still didn't have a definite idea of his quirk, and what other quirks he may have. All Might was zooming through the halls of the school at high speed in his hero form, quickly trying to find the conference room. He seemed to have forgotten the room number and time of the trial when he was checking on Izuku. It was kind of embarrassing really, since he was technically a part of the UA staff. Well, not officially anyways. Darn it! All Might really needed to find this room. He knew there was only one conference room. He just didn't know where it was. After what seemed like a good 20 minutes, it looked like All Might found it. With a mighty yell, All Might opened the door and rushed in like a blur. Am I late? Everyone in the room looked towards the entrance of the room and saw All Might, with what seemed to be a forced and worried smile. From what All Might could see, the so-called trial of Izuku seemed to have just started, which was very fortunate. All Might looked around to see Nizu along with Aizawa and a few of the UA staff. He also saw some of the government officials the government sent. They were sitting near Kenji Tsurigami, the police chief, who looked like a human with Beagle's head. Standing right next to him was All Might's friend, Naomasa the detective. That wasn't all he saw. A few pro heroes were present that weren't a part of the UA staff. To start off small, he saw Native, Death Arms, Backdraft along with Mount Lady. They were only there because they were the ones who confronted Izuku when he escaped. The major power he saw in the room really surprised him, all of whom were ranked heroes. Like him, he saw his old friend and fellow hero Kudo Sakamada, better known as Gang Orca, the number 10 hero. Next was Shinya Kamihara aka Edge Shot. Sitting next to him was one of the heroes who confronted and helped capture Izuku, Blue Genist, who looked very bored. Last but definitely not least was someone All Might never expected to be here, Enji Todoroki, the man also known better as Endeavor, Japan's number 2 hero. His ambitious and prideful fellow hero and rival, who wanted nothing more than to surpass him, even if it meant hurting and alienating his family. But that's a story we'll catch up more on later. Late as always, All Might, Endeavor callously stated with a scowl. He then shook his head lightly. Pitiful. All Might nervously laughed as he straightened up. Sorry about that. I was busy talking with a close friend, All Might said, trying his best to look natural. It wasn't really a lie, but it'd probably be for the best his talk with Inko remained in the dark. Soon All Might coughed a little as he walked over to the long and circular table. Anyways, am I too late for this mock trial? A few of the government officials felt offended by this. None of them were expecting the number 1 hero to say such a thing. Many of the heroes remained quiet, the exception being Nizu, who kept on smiling. Of course not, my friend, Nizu stated rather happily and perky. We were just about to begin. All Might didn't show it, but he was relieved. Very relieved. He still had time to try and put his plan into action. Also to say his piece. Good, that's good. Because I really need to say something, All Might stated, still smiling. But that stopped when he stopped at the large table, with everyone's eyes on him. We all know why we're here. We're here to decide the fate of someone. I rather like to have this done in a proper court, like always. Unfortunately, that's not going to happen. Mainly because some of you think this person deserves such treatment. Everyone remained quiet as they listened to All Might. A few couldn't help but agree with him. Many of course averted their eyes or tried their best to not look guilty or uncomfortable. I won't disagree with you that Izuku has committed some serious crimes. Crimes that might seem unforgivable to you. He's hurt and done some terrible things. Few nodded with what All Might said. The rest silently listened. But we'd be fools to only judge on the bad he's done, and not the good he's also done. I'm not going to defend what he's been doing is right. No matter the reason, what he did was wrong. Though, to blame someone for something they can't seem to control of would also be wrong. Now that immediately got everyone by surprise. More confused than anything. What was All Might talking about? What do you mean, All Might? Gang Orca asked. Yeah, you telling us that this kid has been hurting and attacking people because he was forced to? Vlad King asked in a rather unconvinced tone and expression. That seems very unlikely. All Might nodded. It would seem so. That is, if you knew anything about young Midoriya's quirk, All Might stated, getting everyone's attention. I am not going to go in full detail, mainly because I promised someone to keep it that way. So, I'm going to cut to the chase and purpose something. This caught everyone by surprise. They've never heard or seen All Might act like this. Not even his close friends. And that would be? Kenji Tsurigami asked sternly, yet politely asked. The room got tense as All Might just stood there, like he was preparing for something bad to happen, which only made most of the people present anxious. Even a few of the pro-heroes, because they have never seen or heard All Might act this way before. Eventually, All Might took a deep breath and spoke. I want Izuku Midoriya to be placed under my custody and care, and be able to attend UA High School. Should he pass the entrance exam? The room immediately went dead quiet. No one said a word or even dared move. After what seemed like eternity, someone finally spoke. Could you repeat that? Kenji Tsurigami asked, clearly stunned and confused. Meanwhile, in New York City, New York, ever since Quirks were made public, things have never been the same. While the first known account of Quirks was seen in Xinjiang City, China, that was a complete lie. Quirks have been around since the late 1940s, maybe even longer. Back then they weren't even considered quirks. Rather, special abilities. But that's a tale for another day. Right now let's go to the present. In a large mansion, in a big bedroom, a woman laid on a big bed hooked up to medical equipment and other things. The woman was frail and old with white hair. She had a calm yet bored demeanor. The television was on, which was a large television, which was showing a news report. Not about some war or terrible villain or terrorist attack. It was about what happened last night in Japan, when the most wanted vigilante in Japan was caught, and whose identity was revealed to the whole world. The world never changes, the woman murmured out as she sighed. Unfortunately, a minute later, the door of bedroom opened. The woman looked to see a large man walking towards her. He was big and a bit chubby, also a bit old. Not as old as the woman. He had short black hair with a bit of gray and an honest face. Even though he carried himself in an aloof way, he was dressed sharply and carried a handgun which was holstered. When he made it to the woman's bedside, he sighed deeply. I see you've seen the news, the man said as he looked at the TV. He then turned to look down at the old woman, who didn't look amused at all. Did you already know this would happen? Angela, better known as Angela Petrelli, smirked a little as she shook her head a little. You know that my dreams aren't always accurate, Mr. Parkman, Angela stated as she began to cough a little. After all, Peter along with Gabriel proved that to me a long time ago. Mr. Parkman frowned as he nodded. Still, do you think this kid is the product of your little project? Mr. Parkman asked, still frowning. It soon showed a photo of Izuku on the TV. The last thing we want is one of your children running around and causing mayhem. We don't need another Scylla around. Angela noticed the contempt and venom in Mr. Parkman's tone when he said that last part. He had every right to. Both he and Scylla had history. I'm afraid we may be too late, Angela bitterly stated with another cough. There are reports coming in from South America that people with powerful abilities going missing there. And a few days later they're found dead, with their heads cut open. Mr. Parkman flinched a little as he clenched his hand into a fist. Are you sure it's really him and not? You know? Angela stopped coughing and shook her head. It could be Gabriel, or it could one of my children, as you like to call them, Angela said with a sigh. We'd better send a team to go check. I fear that if word got out to either one of them about this business in Japan, my dream will come true. Mr. Parkman nodded. His attention then went back to the TV, as it kept on reporting the news about Izuku. You didn't answer me before. This kid, Mr. Parkman started to say as he looked very closely at the picture of Izuku. Is he a product of Project Reborn? Or no? Angela frowned as she took a look up at the TV. You know, reading my mind would be easier than waiting for an answer. Yeah, but you're a hard nut to crack, Angela, Mr. Parkman said somewhat jokingly, getting a small smile from Angela. Come on. You know I'll keep on asking. The old woman sighed as she decided to come clean. He's not one of mine. It looks like Gabriel has been busy, Angela said with a small smile. That changed when she saw the look on Mr. Parkman's face. She knew that look all too well. It seems the boy has inherited his father's hunger. How unfortunate. At least he hasn't killed someone, yet, Mr. Parkman said, getting an annoyed look from Angela. We should send a team to evaluate this kid's powers to see if he's a threat, Mr. Parkman suggested, causing Angela to groan at his request. What? Angela, you know this kid is going to be trouble. He's already put at least a dozen people in the hospital, with no hope of recovery. Angela just scoffed as he grabbed the remote of the TV, turning it off. She looked up at Mr. Parkman with a stern expression. Matt, let the local authorities and heroes handle this. From what we could tell, they got this under control, Angela stated, trying to calm Mr. Parkman down a little. But unfortunately, it didn't seem to work. Angela knew Parkman. He wasn't just going to let this go. Tell you what, I'll call Hiro or Ando to check things out. They both owe me a favor. I'm sure they'll make some time to check things out. Being retired, you're bound to have time. Will that calm your paranoia down? Mr. Parkman gave a subtle glare down at the old woman, who glared right back. Not wanting to start something, Mr. Parkman sighed in defeat. He nodded, causing Angela to softly smile. But that stopped when she began to cough again. This time, however, it turned into a coughing fit. Mr. Parkman quickly tried to help Angela but stopped when she raised her hand. Eventually she stopped, but looked very tired. I don't have long, Matt. Even with all these doctors, experimental drugs and treatments, I'm on borrowed time, Angela bitterly said. Still, even though it sounded dark and hopeless, that didn't stop the old woman from smiling. I wish Nathan was here to see what the world has become. I wonder what he would think of it. Matt Parkman frowned sadly as he looked at his boss, Angela Petrelli, an old woman who was very old, who's been around for a long time. She, along with her family and friends, tried their best to keep the existence of Quirks under wraps. Sadly, all that seemed for nothing. She lost many friends and family because of this, notably her eldest son, Nathan Petrelli. I'm not sure what Nathan would think of this world, Angela, but I know he would do anything to make sure that it kept on spinning. Angela softly nodded. Matt was right. A brief moment went by and Angela turned to Matt. Send Renee and one of Noah's boys to South America. It might be a waste of time, but we can't take any chances. Whether it's Gabriel or not, we can't let these murders continue. Matt stood up straight and nodded. He then began to leave, eventually leaving Angela alone. My dreams. I really hope they're wrong, Angela softly said as she tried to go to sleep, but couldn't. All because of a certain dream she had. A dream that was more of nightmare. She saw a city in ruins and in flames, hearing the screams of terror and yells of anguish, seeing countless people on the ground dead or dying. That's not all she saw. She saw a young man, with freckles and green hair. He was smiling as he was covered in something. He was covered in blood. And it wasn't his blood. Thank you so much for joining me on this incredible journey today. I hope you enjoyed exploring the fascinating what-if scenario of Deku. The possibilities were truly mind-blowing. If you found this video entertaining and thought-provoking, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel. Your support means the world to me and inspires me to bring you more captivating content in the future. Stay tuned for more exciting what-if stories and other amazing videos coming your way. Until next time, take care, stay curious, and keep embracing the power of imagination.